In a fiery moment that captured the attention of political observers across the nation, Reppers Jasmine Crockett, DTX, launched a pointed jab at former Trump White House aide Karoline Leavitt's educational background during a panel discussion, only to be unexpectedly challenged by a student whose powerful response turned the tables. The setting was a university town hall, organized to discuss youth political engagement and the future of bipartisanship. The panel included several high-profile figures from both sides of the aisle, including Reppers Crockett and Leavitt, a rising conservative media figure and former press aide. The atmosphere was already charged with political tension, but no one expected the viral moment that would follow. During a spirited exchange on education policy and public service, Crockett took aim at Leavitt's qualifications. "With all due respect," Crockett said, gesturing toward Leavitt, "we're not talking about someone with a background in law, public policy, or deep public service. This isn't someone who's spent a decade studying the Constitution. She has a broadcast journalism degree and interned at Fox News." Laughter rippled through the crowd, at least at first. Crockett's comments drew approving nods from some on the left, who saw the remark as a clever political punch, but the tone shifted when a student in the audience raised their hand during the Q&A session. "Excuse me," the student began, standing confidently. "I go to school for media and communications, and while I may not be studying law or policy, I've interned in political offices, I volunteer for campaigns, and I spend my time informing my peers on how politics works. Does my degree make me any less capable of making a difference?" The room quieted as the student continued. "If we start measuring value based on the letters after our names or the titles in our resumes, we ignore the power of lived experience, hard work, and the desire to serve. Isn't that what public service is supposed to be about?" Even those who had laughed moments earlier seemed taken aback. Crockett, to her credit, nodded and offered a brief apology, noting that she didn't intend to belittle anyone's education, but the impact had already been made. Karoline Leavitt, for her part, remained composed during the exchange. When given the floor again, she addressed both the critique and the student's comment. "I don't apologize for where I come from or what I studied," Leavitt said. "I worked hard to get where I am, and I believe in empowering young people to engage in politics regardless of their background. We need fewer elitist barriers to public service, not more." The incident quickly spread across social media, with clips of the student's rebuttal going viral. Some praised Crockett for her usual sharp wit, while others criticized her for what they called an unnecessary swipe rooted in academic elitism. On the other side, Leavitt's response drew admiration from conservatives and moderates who saw her as the victim of a dismissive political attack. Political analysts chimed in, pointing to the broader implications of the moment. In an age where the traditional paths to power are being questioned, and where Gen Z is becoming an increasingly influential demographic, insults based on education or professional pedigree can quickly backfire. "It's a lesson in optics and authenticity," said political strategist Maya Reynolds. "Voters today care less about where you went to school and more about whether you represent their values and understand their struggles." That student represented a broader sentiment we're seeing nationwide. The exchange also touched a nerve in the ongoing debate about who gets to participate in public discourse. Many young people feel alienated from political conversations, dominated by elites with law degrees or Ivy League credentials. The student's stand resonated because it challenged that gatekeeping in real time. In the days following the event, Crockett addressed the controversy more directly in a social media post. "I believe in lifting up all voices, especially young people. My comments were never meant to diminish anyone's journey. I respect anyone working to make a difference regardless of where they started." Leavitt responded by thanking the student who spoke up, calling the moment a reminder of why we must never gatekeep patriotism, purpose, or public service. While the panel was meant to explore the future of political engagement, it became a flashpoint for something deeper: the ongoing redefinition of credibility, leadership, and who has the right to shape the national conversation. And in the middle of it all, one student, without a title, without a microphone, and without a spotlight, rose to show that sometimes the most powerful voices come from the seats in the audience, not the ones on the stage. days that followed, the student who had spoken up became an unexpected symbol of generational defiance. Identified only as Maya Torres, a junior studying communications and political science, she was quickly contacted by several media outlets for interviews. Though initially hesitant, Maya agreed to speak with a local news station where she doubled down on her message. "I didn't plan to say anything," Maya explained. "But when I heard someone's education being used to discredit their perspective, it just didn't sit right with me. I know so many students, some in journalism, others in social work or art, who care deeply about this country and want to make an impact. Our degrees shouldn't be weaponized to shut us out of conversations that affect all of us." Her calm demeanor and eloquence only added fuel to the fire. Clips from her interview went viral again, with hashtags like "Degrees don't define us" and "Risianari." Maya stood up, trending across platforms. Prominent voices across the political spectrum chimed in, some praising her courage while others used the moment to call out the classism that still lingers in American political culture. What started as a contentious jab from one politician became a teachable moment, not just for the people on that stage, but for the public watching from afar. Think tanks and education advocates even began highlighting the incident as part of a larger conversation on expanding civic engagement beyond traditional institutions. Meanwhile, campus reactions were overwhelmingly supportive of Maya. Faculty, members applauded her for encouraging political dialogue, and student groups invited her to speak at various events, including panels on youth activism and inclusive leadership. Her professors too weighed in, one calling her response a masterclass in civic responsibility. Yet, the moment wasn't without its critics. Some conservative commentators suggested that Maya's defense of Leavitt was too forgiving, accusing her of inadvertently legitimizing a former Trump aide. On the other side, a few progressives criticized Crockett more harshly, accusing her of undermining her own advocacy for inclusion by engaging in academic snobbery. But Maya remained above the fray. "This isn't about left versus right," she said in a campus editorial. "It's about how we treat each other. If we're serious about a better political future, then we have to stop shutting people down just because they didn't follow the same path we did. I want to hear from the teacher, the nurse, the artist, the soldier, not just the lawyer and the lobbyist." That sentiment struck a chord far beyond her campus. Activists began citing the incident as an example of why gatekeeping in politics must end. Several nonprofit organizations reached out to Maya, offering mentorship opportunities and internships. Even Karoline Leavitt mentioned her in a follow-up interview, praising her as exactly the kind of young voice this country needs. And to the end, the panel may have begun as a showcase for political personalities, but it became something else entirely. A moment when a young citizen reminded everyone, politicians included, that education, background, or job title should never determine the value of one's voice in democracy. Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt, two women from vastly different political worlds, inadvertently helped catalyze a national conversation, not by clashing with each other, but by sparking a moment in which the audience, quite literally, took the stage. And in that moment, the real lesson was clear. America's future will not be shaped solely by the ones with microphones in their hands, but also by the ones willing to stand up, speak truth, and demand to be heard. As the national conversation deepened, universities across the country began to echo the moment, integrating the incident into lectures and debates about political inclusion, youth leadership, and systemic elitism. Professors in media, political, science, and ethics courses used Maya Torres' stand as a case study on civic courage and the power of grassroots discourse. Student groups began organizing their own town halls, inspired by the spontaneous authenticity of Maya's words. Many invited local politicians and community leaders but emphasized open mics and student-led Q&A sessions. The shift was clear: a growing demand for democratic spaces where credentials didn't trump conviction. Meanwhile, Crockett's office issued a formal statement reaffirming her commitment to inclusive representation. While she didn't directly walk back her initial remarks, she acknowledged the broader message they sparked. "I've built my career on challenging systems that exclude everyday people," the statement read. My words may have landed wrong, but if the result is more young people standing up to power, even mine, then I welcome that accountability. Leavitt, on her part, capitalized on the surge of attention. She featured the moment in several media appearances, framing it as evidence that the left often dismisses conservatives not just for their views, but for who they are and where they come from. "This isn't just about me," she told one outlet. "It's about the countless Americans who are told they don't belong in leadership because they didn't go to the right school or work for the right institution. That mindset is what keeps Washington broken." Yet amid all the political spin, Maya remained grounded. When asked whether she planned to go into politics, she smiled and said she wasn't sure. "I just want to help people be heard," she said during a podcast interview. "Politics isn't the only way to do that. You can change things by organizing, by educating, by showing up in your community. Whatever path I take, I want to make sure I'm still listening." In the weeks that followed, Maya launched a student-led, civic engagement campaign on campus called Voices Forward, aimed at training young leaders across all fields, regardless of major or political leaning, to speak out on the issues that matter to them. Her first workshop was packed, with standing room only, and over 300 students in attendance. Local journalists covered it as a sign of a generation ready not just to inherit politics, but to reshape it entirely. What started as a clash between two public figures turned into a reminder of the true heartbeat of democracy. Not the elite, not the elected, but the engaged. And perhaps that was the most powerful twist of all. In a political era so often defined by spectacle and division, it wasn't a headline-grabbing politician who stole the moment, but a student, armed not with a degree or a title, but with conviction, clarity, and courage. A reminder that leadership isn't granted, it's claimed. As Voices Forward gained traction, Maya found herself fielding calls from national nonprofits, student coalitions, and even international youth movements eager to collaborate. She was hesitant to let the movement grow too fast, wary of losing the grassroots spirit that had made it resonate in the first place. But she also recognized the moment's urgency. By mid-semester, Voices Forward had launched a digital toolkit, a downloadable guide that helped students set up forums on their own campuses, covering everything from organizing logistics to fostering respectful, cross-partisan dialogue. Within 2 weeks, over 200 universities had downloaded it. High school students began requesting a version tailored for younger organizers. Maya and her team quickly got to work. The national media, still grappling with how a college sophomore had ignited a movement, labeled her the reluctant reformer. Despite mounting attention, Maya refused to let the spotlight distract her. She skipped interviews in favor of attending listening circles, where students shared stories about feeling unseen by traditional politics, first-gen immigrants, community, college students, young conservatives, activists from underfunded rural schools. Their stories, she insisted, were the reason Voices Forward mattered. In Washington, lawmakers began referencing Maya and Voices Forward during committee hearings. A bipartisan resolution commending the rise of student-led civic engagement was quietly introduced, symbolic, but still a signal. Political consultants debated what Maya's success meant for the future of electoral organizing. She remained unmoved by the speculation. "I'm not a brand," she told a student reporter. "I'm a bridge, and bridges aren't meant to be the destination. They're meant to be crossed, but change brings friction." Some university administrators began pushing back, uneasy with the unpredictability of open mic events that occasionally challenged campus leadership. One school tried to require administrative pre-approval for all speakers at Voices Forward events. In response, Maya helped draft a student bill of civic rights, advocating for free speech, transparency, and institutional accountability. Hundreds of students rallied around it, and the policy was quickly revoked. The tension, however, hinted at a deeper shift. A new generation wasn't just speaking up, they were setting terms. As graduation season approached, Maya was invited to deliver the commencement address at her university, a rare honor for a non-senior. She initially declined, but after pressure from students and faculty alike, she accepted with one condition: the speech wouldn't be about her, but about the stories Voices Forward had collected. On the day of the ceremony, standing before thousands, she spoke not of her own achievements but of a student from Appalachia who organized town halls in his coal mining community, of a young woman in Texas who started a bilingual civic education club, of a Muslim student in Ohio who used Voices Forward to bridge divides between religious groups on campus. These stories, Maya said, aren't the future of democracy, they are democracy, and they remind us that the only permission we need to lead is the decision to begin. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, not for a celebrity, not for a politician, but for a classmate who reminded them that leadership doesn't arrive. It emerges, and it doesn't shout. It listens. And so, what began as a spontaneous challenge at a town hall had become something far greater, not just a movement, but a mirror, reflecting a nation that longed not for louder leaders, but for more honest ones. In the months after graduation, Maya took a step back from the spotlight. She declined job offers from political campaigns and think tanks, instead taking a position as a program coordinator at a community organizing nonprofit in her hometown. "I needed to return to the roots of why I started," she said in an interview. "Change doesn't only happen in D.C. It happens in church basements, school auditoriums, and community centers." Voices Forward, however, continued to evolve, no longer dependent on Maya's day-to-day leadership. Regional chapters began hosting annual civic summits, where students and young professionals came together to workshop solutions to local issues, from housing instability to voter suppression. The movement expanded to include art installations, storytelling nights, and digital campaigns, anything that gave people a platform to speak, to be heard, and to act. 1 year after Maya's now legendary Confrontation, a documentary titled Claiming the Mic premiered at Sundance. It followed the rise of Voices Forward, the backlash it faced, and the quiet power of youth movements in reshaping democratic norms. The film didn't portray Maya as a hero, but as a catalyst, someone who lit a fuse and then stepped aside so others could shine. Back in Washington, the political landscape hadn't dramatically changed, but it had been nudged. A few younger candidates began citing Voices Forward as an influence. A new freshman in Congress even referenced Maya's commencement speech during a floor debate on education reform. Years later, when a now well-established civic leader was asked what started their journey, many answered the same way. "I watched a video of a student standing up at a town hall. She didn't yell. She didn't grandstand. She just asked to be heard." Maya Torres didn't run for office. She didn't write a memoir. She didn't monetize her moment, but she built something bigger, and in doing so she reminded a generation and a country that democracy is not something you inherit. It's something you insist on, nurture, and pass forward. One voice. Then another. Then a chorus. Not waiting to be invited, claiming the mic. 5 years later, the ripple effect of Maya Torres's stand had grown into a wave. Voices Forward had matured into a nationwide network with over 700 campus and community chapters, partnerships with educators and civic institutions, and an annual fellowship program that trained young people in grassroots organizing, public speaking, and policy advocacy. It remained proudly nonpartisan, an anomaly in a hyperpolarized era, and perhaps because of that it had influence across ideological lines. Alumni of the program began appearing in unexpected places, on city councils, in school boards, launching startups focused on civic tech, producing documentary series about forgotten communities. They often credited their journey back to those early student-run workshops that asked a simple question: what matters to you, and who needs to hear it? Despite its growth, Maya had remained largely behind the scenes. She traveled occasionally, to speak at high schools, rural libraries, or youth detention centers, places often left out of national conversations. She always arrived alone, carrying a worn backpack filled with Voices Forward materials and listening more than she talked. One fall, during the Voices Forward National Civic Summit in Atlanta, Maya quietly slipped into the back of the keynote auditorium. On stage was a 19-year-old community college student from Mississippi, sharing how she'd used the program to mobilize her town to demand broadband access and public transit funding. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "We were told we didn't count. That our votes, our voices, didn't matter, she said. But someone once said you don't need a title to lead. You just need to speak. So I did. The room erupted, in applause. Maya, sitting unnoticed near the exit, smiled quietly. After the summit, a reporter finally tracked her down for a rare interview. When asked how she felt seeing Voices Forward thrive without her in the center, she paused for a long moment. That's the goal, isn't it? She said. Real leadership means building something that doesn't collapse when you walk away. It's never been about me. It's about the mic being passed again and again. She looked out the window of the community center where they sat. Outside, dozens of students in brightly colored Voices Forward shirts were organizing pop-up voter registration booths and climate teach-ins. They've got this now, she said. And she was right, because in the end Maya Torres didn't change the world by commanding it. She changed it by proving anyone could. The following spring, Maya received a handwritten letter, rare in the digital age. It was from a teacher in a small Montana reservation school, thanking her for inspiring his students. Enclosed were 6 photocopied essays, each from a native high school student who had started a local Voices Forward chapter. One wrote, "No one ever asked us what we thought, but now we ask each other, and we ask our council, and sometimes they answer." Maya kept that letter in her journal. That summer, she returned to her alma mater for the first time since graduation. The campus had changed. Murals of student changemakers now lined the student union. A new civic engagement center bore a plaque, reading home of the first Voices Forward workshop. She visited unannounced, slipping into a student-led training in session. She sat in the back again, unnoticed, until one student pointed her out. The room went quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. Maya stood, flustered but smiling, and simply said, "Thank you. But you don't need me here. You never did." Still, word spread that Maya was back. A few alumni, now scattered across sectors and cities, organized a private gathering at a local park. No stage, no cameras, just picnic blankets, home-cooked food, and stories. As the sun dipped below the trees, they shared how the movement had shaped them. A former chemistry major now running a clean water nonprofit. A law student drafting equity legislation for city schools. A poet whose first chapbook was titled, Claiming the Mic. One young woman, teary-eyed, said, "You helped me believe that conviction matters more than credentials. I didn't think that was allowed." Maya, humbled and quiet, simply said, "It's always allowed. We just forget to give each other permission." That night, as people packed up and hugged goodbye, one alum turned to Maya and asked, "What's next for you?" Maya looked out at the laughter and life around her, then up at the night sky. "I think I'll teach," she said, "but not just in classrooms, maybe in parks, libraries, online, anywhere someone's ready to listen and maybe even speak." And with that, she walked home alone, the way she'd always preferred. Not in the spotlight, but on the path she helped clear, for others to follow and for others to lead. Because the movement wasn't about the mic anymore. It was about the voices, all of them, and they were only just beginning. The following spring, Maya received a handwritten letter, rare in the digital age. It was from a teacher in a small Montana reservation school, thanking her for inspiring his students. Enclosed were 6 photocopied essays, each from a native high school student who had started a local Voices Forward chapter. One wrote, "No one ever asked us what we thought, but now we ask each other, and we ask our council, and sometimes they answer." Maya kept that letter in her journal. That summer, she returned to her alma mater for the first time since graduation. The campus had changed. Murals of student changemakers now lined the student union. A new civic engagement center bore a plaque, reading home of the first Voices Forward workshop. She visited unannounced, slipping into a student-led training in session. She sat in the back again, unnoticed, until one student pointed her out. The room went quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. Maya stood, flustered but smiling, and simply said, "Thank you. But you don't need me here. You never did." Still, word spread that Maya was back. A few alumni, now scattered across sectors and cities, organized a private gathering at a local park. No stage, no cameras, just picnic blankets, home-cooked food, and stories. As the sun dipped below the trees, they shared how the movement had shaped them. A former chemistry major now running a clean water nonprofit. A law student drafting equity legislation for city schools. A poet whose first chapbook was titled, "Claiming the Mic." One young woman, teary-eyed, said, "You helped me believe that conviction matters more than credentials. I didn't think that was allowed." Maya, humbled and quiet, simply said, "It's always allowed. We just forget to give each other permission." That night, as people packed up and hugged goodbye, one alum turned to Maya and asked, "What's next for you?" Maya looked out at the laughter and life around her, then up at the night sky. "I think I'll teach," she said, "but not just in classrooms, maybe in parks, libraries, online, anywhere someone's ready to listen and maybe even speak." And with that, she walked home alone, the way she'd always preferred. Not in the spotlight, but on the path she helped clear, for others to follow and for others to lead. Because the movement wasn't about the mic anymore. It was about the voices, all of them, and they were only just beginning. As the years unfolded, Maya's vision continued to ripple outward in unexpected ways. Technology innovators inspired by Voices Forward developed platforms that amplified underrepresented voices in local politics, turning smartphones into tools of empowerment rather than distraction. Civic educators revamped curricula nationwide, incorporating the movement's principles of inclusivity and authentic dialogue. And artists, poets, and musicians connected with activists, creating cultural moments that made political engagement feel less like obligation and more like community. Meanwhile, Maya found herself mentoring young leaders from around the world, sharing what she'd learned about listening, humility, and persistence. "Leadership isn't a title or a trophy," she told them. "It's a practice, one that starts with showing up and keeps going by trusting that your voice matters." On the 10th anniversary of her initial stand at that town hall, Maya was invited back to her university to open a new civic engagement, center named in honor of the movement she helped spark. She spoke with humility, reflecting on the unexpected journey. "I never sought to be a leader," she said, "but I wanted something simpler. For us all to remember that democracy belongs to every one of us and that the power to shape our world begins with the courage to speak." The crowd rose in applause, but Maya's eyes scanned the room. Not the spotlight, but the faces of students, activists, and dreamers ready to claim their place. Because the story of leadership, she knew, is never just about one person. It's about the countless voices that rise up together, refusing to be silenced. And that chorus, still growing, was only just beginning. Johan Andersen never sought fame. He never wanted to be a hero. Yet the moment he stood up quietly, with nothing but love and dignity, sparked something far greater than any spotlight could offer. His story rippled across the globe, touching lives and inspiring movements in ways he never imagined. From the classrooms of Kenya to the fire stations of America, from a small village in Japan to the bustling cities of South Africa, people found hope and courage in his example. It wasn't about muscles or medals. It was about something far simpler and far more profound: the courage to stand up for love, the courage to choose kindness over cruelty, the courage to be vulnerable and authentic in a world that often rewards noise and bravado. In the end, Johan's quiet stand became a loud call to action, not shouted from a stage but whispered in hearts and lived in everyday acts of compassion. Karoline and Liv, and now Elise, carried this torch forward, reminding new generations that strength doesn't have to roar. Sometimes strength simply stands, and when it does, the world listens.